So let's take a look at some of the best armies and finest contraption of the kin, with a look through 7 strong Leagues of Votann army lists for current Warhammer 40k. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Leagues of Votann. In this video I thought we'd take a look over a whole bunch of army lists for the leagues that have done well on the tabletop, and see what units, combos and detachments good players have used to make it to the top. It still hasn't been a crazy long time since the Leagues of Votann hit the tournament scene. It seems that as with pre-Codex, they've been a pretty well balanced faction as Warhammer 40k goes. Win rates are around about 50%, plenty of top placings, though not a crazy amount of overall tournament wins. I feel like compared with most codexes in Warhammer 40k, while there are certainly still a good few standout units that are going to be in the vast majority of army lists, at least pretty much every unit in the codex has a use in one detachment or another. There's really not too much that feels standout weak, even if there are some things that are fairly overshadowed. Detachments wise, I was interested to see how they stack up against each other and which ones will be doing better by the numbers. It seems so far that both the Needgaard Oathband and the Brandfast Oathband have got some good play in tournaments. The Needgaard Oathband being the index style one with fairly general purpose damage buffs. This one's the most popular one, where around about 2/3 of people seem to be playing it currently. It looks like it's the one with the best win rates both in competitive and casual play. Otherwise, and certainly the second most played attachment, is the transport focused Brandfast one. That's played a little bit less than the Needgaard one. It does seem to be doing a little worse by the tournament stats, a slightly lower win rate, though at the same time they've still had plenty of top tournament placings with this one. It seems like both of them are viable ways to make it all the way to the top tables, with a good list played well by a skilled player. The other ones are slightly lesser plays. Looks like the Del Assault Shift is the next most popular. Someone managed to do well with that at a grand tournament, and a few people are trying out the Hearthband too. In any case, let's take a look at some of the army lists that have been doing well for the kin, placing highly in tournaments, either winning 4 games and losing 1, or going entirely undefeated. As ever, if you are looking to pick up any units for your Leagues of Votann army or any other Warhammer 40k, Auspex Tactics does have some discount affiliate links in the video description below. Feel free to check them out if you'd like to save a bit versus Games Workshop's web store, and any purchases through those help to support the channel. A big thank you to anyone ordering in things through them when you do so. First up, let's start with the general purpose Needgaard Oathband list, this one basically being the reincarnation of the index detachment. The core rule gives you yield points. You gain 1 yield point for each enemy unit that is destroyed, and this one incentivizes you to try and stack up the yield points. Plenty of ways to spend them for some fairly nice big effects, and also some stratagems that you can only use in Fortified Takeover. Those ones are the return fire against the enemy that shot you, the Armour of Contempt equivalent to worsen AP by 1, and then they've got 2 good damage dealer stratagems for extra AP in melee or sustained hits, both of which get better with 3 yield points thrown in. Otherwise, they've got a nice straightforward reroll hits and wounds of 1 when shooting, which is pretty powerful, a fallback shoot and charge one, which is always good to have, and then a fair few viable or interesting enhancements. To take a look at some Needgaard lists, this first one was by Thomas Greer, second up Warzone Houston and Undefeated, and it's got quite a well balanced Votann army with a lot of their staples. This unit starts with a great big central unit of Einherjar Hearthguard focused around a Carl, with their Etikarn plasma guns and concussion gauntlets. They're going with the Carl with Oathbound Speculator, which means that you could have a deep strike and an enormous damage punch with +1 to wound if you sacrifice yield points. That unit looks pretty terrifying, dropping into rapid fire range and dazzling the enemy with plasma fire, and it'd be pretty great for just about any of the damage and defensive stratagems that are available in Needgaard. They might even have the chance for a reroll charge if they drop sometime early game. Then beyond that, we've got great big fire support with 2 Hecaton land fortresses, one with a conversion beamer and one with a railgun. Massive firepower, good defense, and hard to go too far wrong with. It looks like at least some of those might be delivering either the Brockhere Thunderkin units or the Ironkin Steeljacks, big firepower units that again are going to enjoy the buffs that this detachment can bring. The Thunderkin, some of them have grav blast cannons and some have SP beamers. The SP ones are a great target for the sustained hit stratagem, where they could be triggering those fantastically easily. The Steeljacks might or might not be joined by a Mimnir strategist with Dead Reckoning. He could give them some free overwatch, though he does ideally want to be on an objective and somewhere safe, so he might just be loitering on his own at the back. I'm not sure how it was played here. Dead Reckoning allows you to generate more yield points though. Finally, for damage dealers, there's an Arcanist Evaluator, so the lone operative near infantry with a fairly punchy gun up close. Then beyond that, there's lots of good Votann objective support, 10 Hearthkin warriors that can sticky objective the home field and maybe act as a retinue for Uthar the Destined. He'll be able to hand out some free stratagems for those very good value ones from Needgaard here. It could be nice to throw those onto the land fortresses. There's 2 Hernkin Pioneer units to scout up the board and skirmish well, and then a squad of infiltrating Hernkin Jaegers, split by Capricus Carrier into small efficient skirmish units. Overall looks like a strong all-rounder with some good objective grabbers and big hit and damage dealers. Maybe the most unusual picks here I think would be the big squad of Hearthguard and the Arcanist Evaluator. After a little bit of a mixed reception on their new datasheets, the Einherjar Hearthguard have emerged as a pretty popular unit in competitive Leagues of Votann lists. though perhaps particularly so in the Needgaard Oathband versus elsewhere, just getting really quite good support here. They do hit pretty hard with those plasma guns if they can get within rapid fire range. They really enjoy the cast lethal hits with that, and the buffs that you can get from the detachment. If you could go all in with the strike for them for +1 to wound, they're going to be really general purpose. They're not ridiculously tanky, but also could be a good user of void armor with their 2+ saves. If they can get a charge with those gauntlets, then so much the better. Otherwise, for staple characters in the vast majority of lists, worth mentioning the Memnir Strategist. He can sit on a home field objective and raise your yield score by 1 each turn, or take it away if that makes more sense. And if you do put him with a Steeljax unit, then he can get 0 CP Overwatch. That's pretty brutal with the Vulcanite ones, and with their big volume fire, that could mean that you're near enough doubling their firepower with that. Then Uthar the Destined is a really popular one in the majority of army lists. He's one of the only ways that you can manipulate command points, ideally maybe going with a Hearthkin warrior squad, though you could field him solo, ideally staying in range of some big and important units like some Shooty Thunderkin or Hecaton Land Fortresses to help out with the command point discount. If the opponent gets close enough for him to get his melee to work, then that's a pretty nice bonus too. For another example of a Needgaard list, this one is by Jeremy Atkinson, 3rd at Bloodshed Bay and going 5-1. Again, this one takes the big squad of Ironhair Hearthguard, once again led by the Carl with Oathbound Speculator, so again a big hitting damage dealer there. There's 2 Hecaton Land Fortresses once again, and a Hearthkin Warrior squad with Uthar the Destined for handing out some stratagems, plus a Memnir Strategist. I guess he's far more likely to just be sat around on the home field than with the Ironkin Steeljack unit in this list, as this one's taking the variant with the Plasma Swords to march up and be a central objective scrapping unit. We've got Uthar the Destined once again, this time alone, I guess just hiding out of line of sight, maybe in a safe ruin near the home field and giving out free stratagems. Perhaps again good for those Hecaton Land Fortresses. This time they're both taking the very scary Magna Rail Cannons. Potentially jumping out of those once again, there's a few units of Brockhair Thunderkin, one with the SP Conversion Beamers for good stratagem focused units, and then 2 with the Graviton Blast Cannons, which are nice and general purpose. This time there's not 1 but 2 sets of split unit Hernkin Jaegers made into small efficient squads with the Capricus Carriers. That means you'd have 2 to infiltrate into the midboard and then 2 to follow along in their cheap transport unit. A unit of the Chthonian Earthshaker Artillery with the Tremor Shells, so it can put a bit of hurt on some damage 1 units when needed. And finally what looks like a lone Ironhair champion with Darkstar Axe and a Weaverfield Crest. I guess just as a small and generally scary fighty character, there could be a good mix of a nuisance and actually genuinely threaten some damage. I'd guess that it's going to be the Carl leading the Hearthguard though, given the investment for Oathbound Speculator. Definitely a list with a fair few similarities. Certainly seems that the staples are fairly tried and tested. As with the last 2 armies, one of the borderline auto-include things for Leagues of Votann objective support are the Hernkin Jaegers. They're 90 points for an infiltrator unit with toughness 5, always pretty handy to have for early game scoring and screening back the enemy's scouts or infiltrators, plus have a bit of threat with their own between plasma knives and a couple of upgrades within the squad. Their reactive move rule is quite a good one for a forward unit with their ability to back away from melee or hide behind ruins. They get made far more efficient by the Capricus Carrier. This one's a 75-point transport vehicle with 7 wounds at toughness 7. It splits the Hernkin Jaegers into 2 small 45-point units, so quite good for cheap disposable actions, objectives, or trading. And then the transport itself can scout up behind the ones that you just infiltrated, so you have a lot of skirmish units into the midboard. It's got a fairly nice debuff rule, giving you a -1 to hit on something that it shoots, which might occasionally help out, and provides a little bit of autocannon fire, though damage output isn't really its main purpose. And between that and the Jaegers, your opponent's probably going to take more efforts to take them down than they're really worth, particularly with the Jaegers having the option to reactive move back into the transport potentially, which could make them particularly irritating to deal with. Finally for the Needgaard list, here's a 3rd list. This one I believe the highest placing one at the London Grand Tournament by James Marsden, and changes a few things up from the previous ones. This one still has Uthar the Destined backed up by some Hearthkin Warriors, and once again there's 2 Hecaton Land Fortresses with heavy fire support, one with a rail cannon, one with conversion beamer. There's 1 squad of the Jaegers this time, split by a Capricus Carrier, 1 squad of the Scouting Hernkin Pioneers, and 1 squad of the Chthonian Earthshakers that can sit behind the lines and hit the enemy with some indirect fire with damage 1. Otherwise though, a few of the other units are a bit different. This time there's 2 smaller units of Ironhair Hearthguard with plasma guns and gauntlets. It looks like one of them might be led by an Ironhair champion with the hammer and the ancestral crest enhancements, which could potentially allow you to spend a yield point as a command point reroll. Then there's Steeljacks with melee weapons once again, a squad of Brockhair Thunderkin, at this time looking like they might be led by a Brockhair Ironmaster, unless he's just sitting around and buffing the land fortresses. And once again that's going to be a brutal central damage dealer with sustained hits when he can get critical hits quite so easily within their effective range. Finally there's 2 punchy units of Chthonian Berserks, hard hitting but fairly fragile melee troops, one with maws and one with plasma axes, I'd guess they'd be charging out of the Hecaton land fortresses as staging points, then I'm not too sure what might have been jumping out of the other one. The Einhir Hearthguard look like they're not being fielded with teleport crests, so some of them are going to be starting on the board. I guess you'd have lots of things that could go in the other land fortress between them, the Thunderkin or potentially the Steeljacks. Overall seems like these Needgaard Oathband lists have a few staples. Lots and lots of people taking multiple land fortresses, Jaegers, Einhir Hearthguard, and a big squad of Thunderkin with the SP conversion beamers. Before I move on, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Weyland Yutani terrain. They're one option for getting some functional competitive style Warhammer 40k terrain on the board if you'd like to. Their stuff focusing on more functional battlefield terrain, then they can supply the WTC, pretty much the biggest and best known team tournament in the world. Their terrain is made of lightweight and fairly sturdy plastic with different choices of colours. You can have ones that look like an overgrown ruin, an Arctic laboratory, or a medieval castle. They're printed on fairly sturdy but quite lightweight plastic that can be taken down and stored flat, which is often useful for tournaments. For a typical offering, they have their WTC War Master pack, though they've got plenty more. This one has 4 big ruins and 6 small ones and some armoured containers, enough for a full-size table of 40k. And they're perhaps one of the cheaper offerings that comes pre-coloured with slightly limited hobby work needed to get it up and functional. They've got some other sets as well, such as the Pariah Nexus terrain pack pictured here, and also just sets of the big 4 3-storey ruins if you just need a little bit more line of sight blocking things on your battlefield. In any case though, check them out, links down in the video description, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. Next up, let's take a look at the Delve Assault Shift list that did well. This one's lesser played, but is the one that supports the Chthonian Berserks. Here the Berserks gain Deep Strike and Battle Line, so you can take lots of them, and it means that you could get them where they need to be with rapid ingress. For more interesting stratagems, you can potentially reroll all wound rolls with Berserks if you have command points and yield points to spare. There's an advance and charge for some bigger threat ranges, maybe out of transports. The Earthshakers have the potential to slow down units, and there's a return to reserves for the Votann infantry, which is always a pretty handy one to have, and no less so here with some deep striking Berserks. It looks like this one was used to success by Tim Schneider, placing second at a Bedburger Grand Tournament of 46 players, going 5-0 undefeated. Interesting to see really quite a different list here. There's 3 big squads of Chthonian Berserks in this one, all 10 strong. 2 squads take the Maws and 1 squad take the Axes. And then for other Chthonian stuff, there's 2 sets of 2 Earthshakers with the Tremor Shells. Might be interesting with the potential to slow down some enemy units there. Then there's 2 Hecaton land fortresses with the SP conversion beamers. I'd guess they might well be used as staging points to get those Berserks out of and into the enemy. There's Uthal destined for some free command points, not 1 but 2 Memnir strategists here apparently, so potentially to manipulate yield points both on the home objective and maybe a mid-board one. There's 2 squads of Hernkin Jaegers broken into 4 squads with the Capricus carriers, and then interestingly enough, a squad of Brockhere Thunderkin with the longer range bolt cannons, which tend to be by far the least played choice, and it looks like they might be led by a Brockhere Ironmaster here. He has the Delve Worker Navigator, so potentially he can regenerate some slain models from Berserk's units. If the opponent manages to kill some but not all of a squad, then they could come back in really quite a big way. If you can spend a bunch of yield points on it, given how dangerous they could be, that could be quite a big deal. In any case, really quite cool to see a list do well that's not quite so commonly played. The Chthonian Berserks aren't in every single Votann list, they still do a job of hitting incredibly hard in melee for lists that want them. They just have the 1 wound now, even if they do have a 4+ feel no pain and toughness 6, and then have the choice between either Plasma Axe or Concussion Mauls, both being AP-2 and damage 3 attacks. It depends whether or not you want anti-monster and vehicle keywords or a base strength 7 to help out against sort of more medium infantry. I'd probably be a little bit more tempted by the Mauls myself, and lots of people tend to go for the Concussion Gauntlets now. They seem a bit more viable than they were pre-Codex. They have Fight on Death, so a fairly tricky prospect to take down for enemies in melee, and have Mole Grenades that have the potential to turn off Overwatch, which potentially could be helpful for them, though given that shooting happens after movement, maybe not so much as you'd hope. They feel like a unit that's going to get on particularly well with transports though if they don't have Deep Strike, as they really don't want to take damage before they hit the enemy. Finally, let's take a look at some Brandfast Oathband lists, and these ones are the transport detachments. Their core rule gives infantry units within 6 inches sustained hits 1 on their ranged weapons. It did get a nerf with the ability to jump out of transports at unusual times and charge. Potentially you could have units charging from essentially off the board and arriving from reserves here very close by, but Games Workshop put a stop to that. Otherwise they can allow Hecaton land fortresses to crash through terrain, and they're good units. There's a fall back and shoot one. You can further buff infantry shooting with some reroll hits of 1 against a target, and you can return fire with vehicles, though the Hecaton land fortress needs an extra 2 yield points. The enhancement that's most commonly taken here is the Trivarg Cyber Implant. This gives you sustained hits 2 for ranged weapons after a unit disembarks, or if you spend an extra 2 yield points to activate. That's pretty well auto-include on a Brockhere Ironmaster going alongside a big unit of the SP conversion beamers, as that means that you get lethal and sustained hits on a 4+ within their effective range. For one example of a successful Brandfast Oathband list, this one by Andrew Johnson placed 9th at Warzone Houston, going 4 wins to 1 loss. For vehicles, this one has 2 Hecaton Land Fortresses, one with Beamer and one with Railgun, a Caprica's Carrier and a Sagittor, looking like that's going to be splitting the Hearthkin Warriors, so you get multiple efficient objective grabbing units, and I guess you could even potentially do some shenanigans like load up some Berserks in there afterwards if you wanted. For the central damage combo, there's the Brockhir Ironmaster with the Cyber Implants, and he's leading the big squad of 6 Thunderkin with SP conversion beamers. I guess they'd be jumping out of one of those land fortresses and hitting things super hard. And then beyond that, we've got a really big variety of the various different Votann options. More Brockhir Thunderkin with the Graviton Blast Cannons, the split squad of Hernkin Jaegers to go with that transport, 2 sets of Pioneers scouting up the board to skirmish, the Berserks maybe jumping out of one of the transports to hit things hard in a countercharge with melee, an Einhir Champion who seems to be leading a squad of 5 Einhir Hearthguard, potentially quite a long threat range, and I guess that they might have a chance of being in the other Hecaton Land Fortress given that they both have Weaverfield crests, a Memnir Strategist for the yield points, just going on his own, and Uthar the Destined for some free stratagems. Finally, there's a fun appearance of Buri Einarsson here, the fighty lone operative with that great big Darkstar glaive. As we've seen, Brockhir Thunderkin are one of the standout damage dealers of the Codex. They're not really all that tough per point now, just 3 guys with 2 wounds and a 3+ save and T6 for 80 points, but what they lack in terms of durability they make up for in stopping power. Both the Needgaard Oathband and the Brandfast one are excellent with the SP conversion beamers. They get 2 shots that auto wound on a 4+ at greater than 12-inch range, or at AP -2 and damage 3, and if you throw sustained hits 1 or sustained hits 2 into the mix, then they just become absolutely monstrously anti-everything with shooting. If not going for a big central damage combo though, then the Graviton Blast Cannon is also excellent. 3 shots at strength 5, AP 2 and damage 3 with anti-keywords, so it's pretty great both into infantry and vehicles. As a bonus they even strip cover, so can support other things shooting. For another take on the Brandfast Oathband, here's one by Gustavo Martinez, going 5 wins to 1 loss at a 97-player grand tournament. For variations in this one that are more notable, we've got 1 extra Hecaton Land Fortress, they've all got rail cannons here, and then 3 units of the Brockhir Thunderkin, all with the conversion beamers here, hoping for those sustained hits no doubt. Then we've also got a fighter unit of the Einkin Steeljacks with the plasma swords, and once again a squad of Hearthkin Warriors that looks like it's split with a single Sagittor, and 2 units of the Jaegers with the high las beams, so plenty of screening infiltrators and transport units that are annoying to kill. Seeing as there were 3 of them in that list, it seems only fair to focus on the Hecaton Land Fortress, as we've seen it's somewhere between 2 and 3 of them in just about every 2,000 point list. A great big tough vehicle with toughness 12 and 16 wounds and a 2+ save, nice for any defensive stratagems or cover. Most people go for the scanner, so reroll ones to hit, and he gets to ignore modifiers from their basic core rule, and then they'll attack you with a whole bunch of autocannon shots, bolt cannons for damage 2 as well, and then most go for that very scary Magna Rail Cannon, 2 shots at strength 18 and damage D6 +4. Though the heavy SP conversion beamer is a good option as well, that can also get the sustained hits in Needgaard. As well as all that, they're a good staging point for multiple units to be jumping out of, either melee things rushing into the enemy, or ranged things like Thunderkin getting lines of sight. Overall certainly seems like they're one of the workhorses of the army. Finally, last but not least, we've got another Brandfast list that went undefeated at a tournament called Diag Doom by Guy Grimm, and this one goes unusually heavy on the Sagittors, no less than 3 Hecatons once again, and then 3 Sagittors, so lots and lots of transport goodness here. It seems the Sagittors are probably transporting 2 sets of Chthonian Berserks and then splitting a Hearthkin squad. I'd guess the Land Fortresses might have the other units inside, 2 sets of very shooty Brockhir Thunderkin with the SP conversion beamers, and then 1 set of the Einkin Steeljacks with the Vulcanites. It looks like this one's going a little bit lighter on the small expendable units in lieu of just lots of mainline damage dealers, 3 big primary shooting units, 1 with that Brockhir Ironmaster with the upgrade, 3 big hitting transports to back them up, and then some medium transports with fighting melee in them. There's also a Hernkin Jaeger squad here for infiltrate, that looks like that's not being split with the Capricas in this one. Cool to see a few different takes doing well. Looks like some people have been making Sagittors work, and while it seems that in Needgaard just a couple of Land Fortresses seem to be doing the job, running 3 is quite tempting in Brandfast. In any case, cool to see a few examples of what's doing well for the league so far. Let me know your own experiences with them and what detachments and unit combos you've been using to see victory for the kin on the tabletop. I look forward to hearing all your thoughts down in the comments below as always. As mentioned, a big thank you to Weyland Yutani Terrain for sponsoring the video. If you were looking to pick up some functional competitive style 40k terrain, there'll be links down in the video description. If you do happen to pick anything up through them, there's the code Auspex5, which gives you 5% off any purchase. I'll leave that there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description. Channel patrons get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.